Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Modeling a Car with T-Splines 3 for Rhino. This is part 3 of our 3-part webinar series, and we hope you've enjoyed the first 2 parts. I am Matt Cederberg, the CEO of T-Splines Inc., and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Kyle Houchins, a T-Splines user and the owner of the Outside Digital Art and Design consultancy, will be doing the car modeling demo today. He'll be using T-Splines version 3.1 for Rhino and Rhino 4. So hopefully you've been to the first parts of this webinar, and you'll recognize that the purpose of these webinars is to show you how to use T-Splines to model a car. Again, our focus is more on theory, since T-Splines is still a relatively new surface type, and the biggest barrier to success that we have found is that designers are used to approaching problems like designing a car a very different way, using NURBS, which is the traditional way to model with CAD. And T-Splines can help you create a nice model in a short amount of time, but it does require a new way of thinking about modeling. So our hope is that by going through this process of modeling an entire car, then you'll have a chance to just kind of observe through these couple hours of the webinar series how to approach tasks in T-Splines, and so that you'll be able to use it in your own projects in whatever industry you're in. So the agenda today is that we'll pick up where we left off at the last webinar, and we'll be adding the final details to the car model. We'll be adding spoiler, mirrors, and vents, and then a critical step will be preparing the model for data transfer. One of the big benefits of T-Splines is that you can convert your T-Splines data to NURBS data, so it can be used any place downstream. And then we'll reserve some time for questions and answers at the end. And again, the goal of all of this is to introduce T-Splines to you as a fast, powerful alternative to NURBS modeling, and to give you a chance to ask questions about what's possible with T-Splines. So just a bit of housekeeping again before turning the time over to Kyle. Please use the chat box liberally during the webinar. Our webinars are always more interesting for ourselves and everyone else if we have a nice back channel discussion going. So we have staff here on hand that can answer your questions, and so you can ask them without interrupting the flow of the webinar, so we hope that you'll do that. Also, please feel free to tweet if you're on Twitter during the webinar. Your responses and questions, we'll respond to them there as well. We're at T-Splines, or you can use the T-Splines hashtag. And this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it afterwards. So with that, let me turn the time over to Kyle. Again, Kyle is a T-Splines user and the owner of the Outside Digital Art and Design consultancy. And let me turn the time over to him.
Excellent. Thank you for coming, everybody. This is our part 3, and if you saw either one of our part 1s and our part 2, this is kind of where we're sitting. The things that we're going to basically cover today are the remaining bits and pieces of the car. We're going to add the vents. We're going to add that big obnoxious rear diffuser thing, and then talk about how to approach some of the other detailing. And then something that I really want to show towards the end is how, once this thing is converted to NURBS, how you can precisely trim areas of the car and then actually build new T-Splines pieces off the edges of the NURBS data. So the one thing that we always get questions on is, I'm a NURBS modeler, how do I trim, how do I make holes and stuff, and I want to kind of open up a discussion, at least in your own mind, about how possibly to approach things like that. So we'll cover that. We'll cover that as we're getting ready to finish this thing up. So basically, part 1, part 2. Obviously, you can go back and take a look at those at your leisure. But we laid the car out. We added some detail. We sharpened it up, and we have a fairly respectable car shape here. And the next thing that we want to do is start throwing some details in it. And so, let's look at a few areas that we want to address. One, if I go to the front view, you'll notice that we have kind of a big open mouth on this thing as far as an intake. And you'll notice that we've got a bunch of panels up here, but we don't really have any topology set up for making a hole like this. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to add some data in here to allow me to have topology that I can remove to first create the hole, and then I'm going to go in and model in the actual pieces that we're going to be using to make this opening. So the first step would be to add some edges in here so that I can break this up, and I'm going to do this in box mode. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the modify menu, and I'm going to add an edge here, and you'll notice that I have an edge here and it doesn't go all the way through. I've teed it off here. I think in retrospect what I'm going to do is actually just continue that edge. So instead of adding an edge, I'm actually going to add points, and I'm going to use a Rhino snap to snap right to the edge of that, and then I'm just going to run right down here and divide that. And so now what's happened is you can see that I'm starting to get some detail in here, but I need one more edge on the bottom so that I can have an opening here. And again, I'm going to do that with an insert edge. So I'm going to bring this up to about, I'm going to turn my snaps off, bring this up to about here, and just accept that. And now I have, if I look at my faces, I have some faces in here that I can start playing with. So what I can do one of two things. One, I can extrude these in. Go in maybe a couple of times. And I get a big giant hole in this thing. You'll see that that's starting to make the basis of our intake here. And since we've added some geometry, I'm going to go ahead and run make uniform just to straighten everything out. And you'll notice that we get kind of a nice opening here. But this needs to be a through hole. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to delete these faces. And you'll notice what happens when I delete these is this inside edge becomes unresolved, and it opens up into a nice sharp crease. Well, the detail that I've added in here allows me to start pushing and pulling some of these points to start getting our shape. And got a weird little inflection there. What's going on right there? Let's take a look at box mode and see what we've got. It doesn't appear to be anything strange going on there. Let's double check and make sure that we've got the right number of verts. That may be a mesh setting because I'm using a pretty small mesh setting here. But I tell you what, I'm not going to panic about that. Let's keep going and see if it resolves itself as we're going. If not, then we'll dig into that a little deeper. All right. So if you look at the design on this thing, you'll notice that we have a little upright in here and an opening for an oil cooler or an intercooler or something like that. So we need to add that geometry for those uprights. And as it sits, again, I don't have enough detail to be able to do that. I don't have enough faces in here to be able to do that. So I'm going to add one edge right here. Again, if you remember back when we got started, and I said the way that you want to think of T-Splines is if you were building a model out of sticky notes. The idea, maybe I'll run that one all the way out. Let me undo that. See if that improves things a bit. So if you had square sticky notes and you were building this model, you'd need to have faces in here that you could connect. And so in this case, I didn't have enough data to be able to create those those uprights. So I'm going to subdivide these pieces a little bit by inserting edges, and that will give me enough, that'll give me some faces that I can play with here. So I have a face here, and I have a face here, and those are approximately in the location that I'd want my uprights. So let's go ahead and just bridge between those. And I'm going to bridge using face mode. And when I do this, it's going to cause a problem. And we'll discuss what the problem is and how to fix it and why it happened. But I want to show this because it's a really common issue. Now, if I just did one segment, I just have one face in here, but I wouldn't have any opportunity for deforming that because it would be straight, right? If I built a NURBS curve that just had 2 points on it, I can't bend it because I need a third point in order to be able to do that. So in order to be able to shape this thing a little bit, I want to use more than one segment. So I'm just going to set this up for 2, and I want to double check my alignment. And it looks like I am not aligned because you'll notice that there's 4 points coming off of here. There's a, if I can get this to a spot where you can see it, there's a line indicating which point it's coming off of, and then there's an arrow indicating which point it's, which direction it's going to go. And in this case, I need to go from this corner to this corner, and right now it's aligned over here. So I'm just going to click this corner, and you'll notice that now these are aligned correctly, but the arrows are going in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to click it one more time, and you notice that the arrow changed direction. So that's a way that when you're looking at it, you can double check to make sure that your bridge is going to happen. I remember when I was first starting, I was always making these really hideously tortured, bridges that were twisting all over the place, and it was just a simple matter of not understanding how this interface works. So if you get a clear understanding, just make sure that your corners are lined up, your arrows are going in the same direction, right-click to accept, and your bridge should happen with no problem. So my bridge happened, but it threw a crease and did all sorts of other ugly stuff in here. The reason that happened is when I bridged using a face, it actually put a back on this. And since it put a back on this, what it's doing is it's actually throwing a crease through the rest of the model because of these 2 faces. So all I need to do to resolve that is just pick those 2 faces and delete them, and that'll get rid of the unresolved inside edge condition and allow that to all blend together nicely.
So, Kyle, one question that I have, so in order to get that kind of that bridge geometry for that vent there, Kyle needed to add some more faces to get the right topology. One question I just have for you that are watching the webinar, and you can respond just by kind of typing in the chat box, but how intuitive has that been to you as you've used T-Splines to realize that to add bridging and add detail like that, then you just need to change the topology layout and add more faces? Is that something that's been intuitive? Do you have any, have there been ways of thinking about that are especially useful to you? Because that's really kind of some of the basis of modeling with T-Splines, is just understanding the importance of how your faces are laid out. But if anyone has any comments or even any more questions about that, we'd be interested to hear those.
So the next step on this would be to just tighten up a little bit, because right now it's kind of loopy looking. And the other thing that I'd want to add on this is there's a kind of a spoiler that comes off the bottom of this thing. Has a little bit of a lip and stuff like that. And I may want to add a little bit more geometry in here. And to do that, again, I can just grab this edge, because right now I don't really have enough geometry in here to make the spoiler that I want to make. So I'm going to just insert a few more edges. And again, I'm using simple here. Oops, point. I need an edge, not a point. There we go. Because I'm still pretty comfortable with the fact that I can add more stuff where I need to add it, move stuff around where I need to move it around. All right. All right, let's pull this apart a little bit. There we go. Let's take a look at box mode. That's all seeming to behave itself.
Kyle, it looks like your screen, maybe it's just on mine, but it looks like it's frozen. I don't know if anyone else is seeing that, but maybe you could just maybe stop and then start sharing your screen again.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
Back?
Yep.
Is that back? Excellent. All right. So let's straighten this out a little bit. Slide this over a little bit. Just get everything nice and lined up. All right. So, now we've got a little bit of extra geometry to play with. I can come in here and start pushing or pulling this around to get the front end to start doing what I want it to do. And it looks like I've got a weird little issue going on here.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on that. What's your thought on that, Kyle?
My first thought would be to check and make sure that I don't have any doubled up geometry. So I'm going to select the entire model, and I'm going to hit the weld button. And that's going to get rid of anything that's coincident, but it doesn't look like that fixed it.
Yeah, I would turn on your tangency handles and see if there's anything interesting going on there.
I bet you're right. I bet we've got a tangency handle.
So what tangency handles are is at the edge of a T-spline surface and also at the edge if you have a G0 crease going through your model, then the tangency handles just let you control the tangency coming into that. So if you, I don't know if you turn them on yet, if you go to the T-splines menu.
Well, let me just run my second fix, which is to remove creases.
Gotcha.
And if I remove creases and that doesn't fix it, which actually it did.
Ah, okay. Well,
then
we'll come to tangency handles later then.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about them because I think that's a good, if I didn't fix it, let's not do that and not fix it as we breathe a collective sigh of relief that it got fixed. And take a look at what those are. In the display, there's a section in here under grips called tangency handles. And as it's set up right now, I can display none. But let's go ahead and display them all. And what they are is on the edge of a surface, you've actually got a second set of handles. Anytime there's a G0 situation, there's another set of handles out here. And these control how the G0 situation is dealt with. And what I can do is I can pull these in, I can push them out, and basically control what's happening on the edge of that G0 scenario. In this case, I don't necessarily want anything to be happening there. So what I'm going to do, and you'll notice that they're all around the model here, these extra little dots. It might be easier to see if I unshade them. Is they're all here, and you'll notice that as I pull these, I can affect what happens to the edge of this surface. Well, in this particular case, I don't want anything going on there, so I'm going to actually go ahead and just select all my points and right-click on the crease tool to remove creases. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but what that does is essentially reset all the tangency handles back to 0.
Exactly, yeah.
It actually does it remove the tangency handle?
Yeah, it just sets them at their default.
Actually,
Yeah, it sets them to their default position so that they're not influencing the surface.
Okay. So what that does is that basically removes the influence that the tangency handle was having that was causing that weird inflection, and that weird inflection now is gone. So let me go back to my options and just display none, because what I don't want to do is accidentally grab one of those things and move it. And let's start tightening up this front end a little bit. Right now, this is kind of a nice transition that's happening here, but it's a little too soft. So I'm going to just grab this and I'm going to insert some edges. I'm going to use the both sides option because I'm just going to run one on either side of this. It'll just save me a step because I need to add one at the top anyways. That tightens that up a lot. Same thing here. I'm going to add an edge in here. Let that tighten up. So you see that I've got a lot more control over what's happening here now, because I can independently adjust these and sculpt on them a little bit. If I needed that to be even tighter, then I can add an edge in here. And basically I'll just pick this edge ring here. Come on. There we go. Edges. All right. Insert one more edge. I'm going to use I'll put one right about there. So I've added detail only where I need it. And the cool thing about this is I can always go back and delete it if I don't need to. But now I have this control, and it allows me to do all sorts of stuff with this intake. In this case, I'm going to leave it pretty much alone, but I now have the detail I need to go in and start working this guy a little bit. Pull that out. And again, I don't want to get into a big heavy design session here, but the whole idea behind this is once you get this set up the way you want it, you can now start experimenting with all sorts of stuff as far as making shapes with these things. And in this case, I want this thing to be in a little farther, so I'm going to push it in. I don't want to go too fast or too furious, but the whole idea here is just to show the flexibility of how you can iterate on this stuff. Say, for instance, I don't want this wiggle in here. Like, say I've got a wiggle in here, and I don't want it. If I want to just straighten that out, all I have to do is delete that edge. Once I delete that edge, it gets rid of that point, and that thing straightens right back out. Now I can come in here and make a little bit finer adjustment as necessary. All right. That's not too hideous. All right. I still need a little bit more geometry in here because I'd like to have a little pull and a little return on that thing in order to be able to get kind of the spoiler thing that I was, or the intake thing that I was looking for here. So I'm going to throw one more edge right inside this thing. Both sides off because I just want to go on one side. And you can see how, depending on how much detail I throw at this thing, I can really tune what's going on here. If I want this to taper out more slowly, I can just delete an edge. You notice that'll just blend out a little bit. You can see the difference there. See how it sharpens up as that comes in? If I wanted this to follow through more, I'd just continue these edges out. But in this case, I think I'm going to pull a little detail out of this because there's a little wiggle going on right here that I don't want to deal with. So I'm going to just dump this. That'll straighten out a little bit. And then I can just pull this however I want. Let's take a look at top view and see what we got. That's not too bad. Again, you can nitpick this however you want. We have some detail here, so it's like you can play with it. You know, what happens if it's got fangs, or what happens if this pulls in? You know, you can iterate with this stuff, which is the, you know, I keep saying this over and over. The power of having this model be one single unified surface allows you to explore stuff as a designer that you would not have access to if you were just trying to build this thing as a CAD model.
Kyle, could you check your display settings? I think you might be on the fastest display, which means it's not quite as smooth as the actual surface is at your star points. Could you just show that in fast a bit? There's a question coming in about how if you use old NURBS knowledge from Hans, it says that you should try to get isoparms joining nicely with no tangency jump. This is not done here in the bumper. Is it a good idea to keep nice isoparms? I wonder if he's referring to those star point regions.
Well, the isoparams in a T-Splines model are a little bit different than the isoparams that you're used to looking at in a NURBS model. And having an isoparam that does something like this is not a bad thing, because if you notice, if we shut this off, it's, you know, it is smooth through those regions. And you have to get out of your NURBS head a little bit when you're doing T-Splines modeling, because a lot of the NURBS rules don't necessarily apply. Because, you know, you're right. You're absolutely right. If you were, you know, doing something like this in a NURBS model, that would not necessarily be what you want. I've got a curve here. Let me hide that. But in a T-Splines model, that's exactly what you want, because you want the detail where you want detail, and you want big, wide patches where you don't want detail. So in an area like the body side, where you want this to be nice and smooth, you know, you want big patches. You don't want a ton of extra additional detail in here. And in fact, you can even play with, you know, doing things like taking edges out to straighten areas of the car out. You know, where we've got some car people at this. There was an old saying about Colin Chapman, who is the head of Lotus forever, and his design philosophy was to build a chassis and then keep removing parts until the chassis collapsed under its own weight, and then put that part back in. That's very similar to how you build a T-Splines model. You know, you don't want tons and tons and tons of extra detail if you don't need it. And, you know, in this case, we can even look at areas like this and say, these aren't really necessary, so I'm going to pull these out. Because unless I need the control here, you don't need to have the detail, because it is okay for it to tee off. And when you remove the extra controls in there, then the computer does the interpolation for you, and you know, quite frankly, the computer's a lot better at interpolating that stuff than we are. So if you want the smoothest surface possible, then use the least amount of data and let the computer do the work for you. So in a typical NURBS model, a patch layout like this would give you an ulcer, but in a T-Splines model, this is actually not, you know, this is not a bad thing. So don't worry so much about the patch layout on this. Worry more about how your highlights are tracking and where your light is going, and add or subtract detail based on that. Any other comments along that? I mean, there's kind of a philosophical discussion there that I think is worth addressing, because, you know, myself, I was coming from a NURBS background, and I know a lot of you are coming from a NURBS background, and there is a fundamental, you know, fairly significant difference between how you're modeling in T-Splines and how you're modeling in NURBS.
Yeah,
although
and
they're
just
fundamentally different, they're compatible. You know?
yeah, and I'll just make a comment, Kyle. With all due respect to Kyle, his approach is just one way of approaching T-Splines modeling, and it's focused more on, I mean, honestly, quick form finding.
Yeah.
If you another webinar that we put on recently, I'll put a link to this in the chat, but it was done by Sky Greenwald, who is doing airplane models with T-Splines. He's much more picky about his isocurve layout, and his approach reflects that. And so with him,
absolutely.
like for him, like isocurve drift is a big deal, and he's able to affect that. It takes a different process of setting up your model, but it's just kind of a different approach.
Yeah. All right. So we've got our basic front end laid out, and obviously you can adjust this at will. We've got some nice stuff happening here, some nice blending in and out of stuff, some nice highlight tracking and stuff. And again, you know, a situation like this is an area that would be a really difficult thing to model in NURBS. This would be, you know, a primary surface here, a primary surface here, and then a fairly considerable amount of blending in order to get, you know, that kind of thing going on there. So the one thing that you can't do in NURBS is change your mind, grab the whole thing, and move it up and down, and not lose your original layout. So let's straighten out this little area right here. This is a situation that there's a little bit of a wiggle going on there, and I want to straighten that out. And again, I'm going to use the same trick where I'm moving the pivot point and then just scaling to that point, and you'll notice that all those CVs just line right up. Adjust kind of how that comes in and out. Can affect that highlight just by moving the points around. Okay, so without laboring that too much, I think we'll call that done. Now, in the rendering, I showed that there was a secondary intake going on in here, and I think I may want to tighten up. I may want to tighten this thing up just a hair. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to add one more edge in about like that. So now I've got a ring here of faces that I can duplicate. Go into the Modify menu, and I can duplicate those. And if I hide everything else, you'll notice that I have a secondary part that was built right off my first part. Same layout, same everything. So if I wanted to do something and then bridge it back in and connect it, it's all right there. But in this case, I'm just going to start playing with this thing and create another kind of like a brake duct intake or some crazy thing like that. I'm going to pull this through. And maybe I'll just scale this in a little bit. Again, you know, you're designing on the fly. So you know, is it a 3D sketch tool? Is it a, you know, is it something for just chasing forms? Is it something for technical surfacing? Yeah, it's all of that, depending on how you want to use it. I'm going to add a few more edges in here, just so that I can pull out another detail here. For all you big wing tuner kids out there, we'll add some style to this thing. Now, I can do a couple of things. I can, you know, I could bridge this back so that it's an enclosed piece. I could save it for later. I could convert it to NURBS, cut it off, cap it. I could export this to SolidWorks and finish out detailing it, you know, however else I wanted to do it. But in this case, I'm going to leave this just kind of hanging for right now. And you'll notice that that drops right into the original opening. It gives me a nice color break and all that kind of stuff. So the idea that I want to get across there is basically the idea of using surfaces that you already have to generate, you know, kind of iterative family of shape forms, and, you know, go from there. You can throw some symmetry on this, and basically we go to top view. Even though they're not attached, symmetry is still enabled, so you'll notice that as I modify one, the other one goes. Okay. I'm not going to get too nutty with that. But so that's copying intakes, or copying, you know, copying surfaces to make kind of an iterative part. So let's look at the headlight area, and again, I'm going to go back to box mode when I do this. And, you know, I probably have enough detail in here to do what I want to do with the headlights. And if you'll notice on the you know, the model that we used to promote this, there was kind of a big headlight well with some inset, you know, kind of projector beam kind of headlight things going on. And then there was a big hood bump that came out of the top of this. And I actually made those out of two separate pieces. And so what I did was I originally started by making the headlight well. And again, I just extruded that a couple of times. And if we go back to toggle smooth, you'll notice that there's going to be a big suck in there now. And this gives me the geometry that I need to do to start playing around with my headlight forms. And one of the things that I kind of found when I was messing around with this was that depending on how I inserted some edges and stuff on this, I actually found a cool little kind of headlight tuck-in thing that I wasn't planning on, and I liked it, and so I just kind of went with it. And what happened was I was just kind of playing around with this thing, and I noticed that this started tucking under, and I may need to run that edge out a little farther, so I'm going to insert a point here. Something about there, and we'll go ahead and run it all the way out because I can always delete it later if I don't like it. Was, you know, as this started to tuck, I was getting this kind of cool little under highlight here, and I kind of liked it, so I decided to leave it and run with that. And I just left that as well, and obviously that's something that you can adjust, and we're going to want to make this a little grumpier looking, so I'm just going to pull these in like that. You're starting to get some really cool forms going on there. And again, something that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but once I got into 3D, it appeared as I was moving stuff around, and I kind of discovered that and liked it. And, it changed the design a little bit, and it allowed me to make a decision in 3D that I wouldn't have discovered if I was just trying to copy a sketch.
So
again, I know a lot of you guys out there that do this for a living. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I'll let you finish your thought, Kyle, and then I'll jump in.
A lot of what you guys do for a living is copying sketches. That's what you do, and that's you can do that. But for me, a lot of my task and what I'm given to do on a daily basis is to design stuff, and so I'm using this as not only a CAD tool, but I'm using it as a as a design tool, and that's my primary function. So.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to follow up with that. We had actually someone that's been watching the webinars followed up with the email to me between the last webinar and this one, just asking a few kind of pointed questions about the relevance of all of this, about the time Kyle's taking to explore forms here by moving control points, and I thought those were legitimate questions, and I guess I'd be interested to hear back from the audience, seeing this form exploration as Kyle's kind of discovering things in the 3D. Is that relevant to you? Is this something that you would ever actually do to kind of design in 3D as you model? That's a real question that I have as we kind of position T-Splines as far as what is actually useful for you. Is this something that you have seen benefit in or anticipate benefit in, or is it maybe needless time spent?
All right. So we've got the front end fairly well developed for what we want, and I need to build the hood bump. So to do that, I actually want that to be a separate piece, because I want that to be a fairly severe element, and I want to be able to control that independently. And then what I'm going to do when I convert that to NURBS is go back and just do a traditional blend surface between the two. Now, we can agree to debate that, and as to whether that's a valid approach. Would it make more sense to build it as a single element? Maybe. If that's what you want to do, you can. And if you want to do that, then it's just a simple matter of going in and adding enough geometry so that you can pull that thing out of there. But in this particular case, the way I chose to do that was to duplicate some faces, slide those up a little bit, scale it, would help if I scaled it to the right spot. There we go. And start developing it from there. And in this case, what I was doing was just adding a little bit more geometry, pulling it through the original surface, and making an intersecting part. And if I toggle that smooth, get everything smooth here. There we go. Then I can start to develop this. And again, it goes back to the, is this the ideal way to do it? I don't know. You know, I mean, use your own judgment as far as that's concerned. But what I do want to get across is the flexibility that you have to be able to choose how to do stuff like that, and then how you would go about doing it. And in this case, this thing is still massively wide. So I'm going to throw some symmetry on this at this point because it's kind of shooting off on the edge here. And I'm going to discover it just based off of this edge. Oops. Try that again. Oh, I see. Have to have a symmetrical model to start with to discover symmetry. So I'm just going to do this so it's not isolated anymore. Now I can grab the whole part and scale it in probably more and start moving some faces around some edges. Get a shape that I'm looking for. Again, and since it's all unified, it's super easy to explore with. I'm going to pull these forward a little bit. Get that relationship a little better. And scale this in. All right. Now, there was a grill opening in this thing, and I don't have it here, so I'm going to move this guy around a little bit until it's about where I would want it to be. Just that a little bit. There's a dent in the highlight. Not going to get away with just pulling it. All right. So I've already got a hole here waiting to happen because I've got two faces here I can delete. So I'm just going to kill those. And again, when you do that, realize that you've created an unresolved inside edge here, which is going to throw a crease through the model. All you have to do to fix that is just extrude that edge. That edge will resolve, and your smoothness will come back. Oh, if only it was that easy for us to recover our smoothness personally. I'm going to add some edges in here to tighten it up. No, not points, edges. I'll tighten that. I'm going to need another edge down here, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this guy, insert another edge down here. And now we've got enough geometry that we can work with it. Put a little dent right in the center of this thing, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that out. And maybe raise this up a little bit so that it's got a little bit more height that thing. Eek. Get rid of that. Straighten out some of that mess. Now, if you start getting to the point where the thing is getting really out of shape, let's take a look at this. Go into box mode and take a look at what you've got. All right. If you've got a huge dent in your box mode like this right here, then that's a good place to start looking at your inflections. So let's take some of that out. And I'm just going to go into point mode. I'm just going to eyeball this to straighten it out. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. There's actually kind of a cool trick that you can do to straighten this stuff out. One is take an edit point curve and snap it to, some points here. Kind of straighten that thing out. So you get a nice arc going through there. Actually, I probably need one more point down here. But what it does is it gives you a spline between things that you can either reference visually, or you can actually just move it from here to, if we have an intersect snap on, to where it intersects with the curve. And you can straighten those things out using a curve. You can straighten them out using nice param. Honestly, my favorite trick for straightening this kind of stuff out is that scale trick, but I've also been looking at this stuff long enough that a lot of times I can just visually straighten it out. And then if it's really critical, you can go back and start throwing math at it if you need to. All right. These probably need to be more like that. All right. Let's straighten out this whole bottom edge. Actually, we have symmetry on, so I just need to do one side. T key, relocate the manipulator, scale it. Straighten all that right out. And again, if any of you didn't see the first webinar, there's a great trick when you do stuff like this. If you scale this stuff, it's my favorite trick of all time, so I'm going to show it again. Straighten it out. If the thing gets screwy and you get it straightened out, then grab your points and use the bend tool. You can actually place points mathematically using the bend tool. No reason for me to do that here, but it's just such a great trick. I like to show it over and over and over and over again. Now, I've got a point that's kind of diving under here, so if I go here and just straighten these out a little bit. Again, I'm kind of eyeballing this, but you can get as fussy about this as you want. All right, let's not get too lost on that. All right, shade it and smooth it, and let's take a look at what we got. So we got a pretty nice shape there. And the presentation model that we used had a couple of little details on the hood that we pulled out, and that's, again, super simple. I'm just going to insert an edge, something about there, and I'm going to insert edge with both sides on, like that, and now I can pull a ridge out of this thing. And start getting some cool, good shape detail. Do the same thing with a scoop. If you wanted to put a scoop in this, you know, it would be a matter of just adding enough geometry in here so that you could blow a hole and then extrude it in. But you can see how gorgeous that thing tapers in and out, and it's completely controllable. You know, if you want this to taper out farther, does this trick look familiar? Taper it right out. Play with the angle of how it goes in and out. BMW fans rejoice. Need a nice BMW hood on here. All right. Let's show the whole model and see what we have. So now we have a nice setup here. This edge needs to come back farther. And so I'm going to just pull it through so far it needs to go. And then it's like my front's intersecting all the way around, so I'm good there. And let me just straighten this out real quick. So I know this needs to come back that far, so if I go to box mode, I can just grab these guys using the C-plane disc so that I know I'm not moving in or out of the modeling environment, just side to side and up and down. I can just very quickly drag that around so that I'm intersecting. All right.
Kyle, let me just jump in. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I know some people block out their days in hour chunks, but we've got a half hour left.
Sure.
Kyle will just finish out the detailing and then explain how to prepare this model for export downstream. Again,
Sure.
we hope you can stay with us. If you do need to check out, we are recording this, and we'll send you a link. And again, whenever you do take off, we have a survey that will pop up when you leave the webinar. We'd really appreciate if you could just take a minute to fill that out to give us some feedback about what you liked and how we can improve these webinars in the future.
Okay, great. So pretty much that's what we're looking at for the front end. The additional details that I had added in there were, you know, clip art pieces that I had brought in from another, you know, from a previous session. I have an intercooler built and headlights and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to skip that stuff for now, and I'll show you the completed model when we're done. But let's look at the rear end on this thing and build this diffuser and the wing. All right. So same thing we did on the front. We need to make sure that we have enough geometry in here to be able to work with. And in this case, I don't quite have enough faces in here to you know, to do what I need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a point here, snapping to the end of this. Where are you? There we go. Come on, where'd my snap go? Near snap. Ah, helps if you have the right snap on. All right, I'm going to just bring this through like this. Let it do its thing. It's going to make this edge a little sharp, but that's okay. There we go. So now I have, you know, kind of an opening here, and I may need to add, one more edge in here so that I have a nice lip there. So let's do that. Turn my snaps off. Turn both sides off. Bring that out there. So you can kind of see where I'm getting at. Again, going back to thinking about this thing as being built out of Post-it notes. Once this updates, this is going to sharpen up. Now I've got my faces in here that are just waiting to be pulled out and turned into my diffuser. And what I'm going to do, let's see, how am I going to do this? I'll tell you what, let's make a well first. So let's go to box mode because extrusions and stuff always happen really fast in box mode, so I like working that way. So I'm going to pull this in just a little bit to get my corner. Now, you'll notice what happened when I extruded this. It made an extra row of faces down here. I don't want those, so I'm going to delete these right now before they cause a problem. And then I'm going to go back to these faces, and I'm going to extrude one more time. I need more faces again, that's fine. Just delete them. If I didn't delete these, this is what would happen. It's going to throw creases through here, and it's going to make a big mess, and it says unable to convert objects. So these are actually screwing up the whole model. So, holy smokes, or it crashes. Boo. All right. Restart. We should get a... Oh, did we not get an error save? That's going to be a bummer. That's a bummer. All right. Well, let's finish up the... We'll build the rear diffuser, and then I'll use a saved version of the model that I was working on. So go ahead and add this in here. And go ahead and add this in here. Insert one more edge. All right, get our faces. Go to box mode and extrude. 1, 2. I'm going to pull these guys out of here. And we should be able to convert no problem. There we go. That's how it's supposed to work. I'm going to pull this edge in a little bit because I want this to roll underneath. Like, pretty much as far as I can go. Pull that in until it collides and then back it off a little bit. Now, we can do the exact same thing we did on the front end of this, which is to grab a loop of edges here and duplicate them. And I'm going to use the scale tool and just alt drag to get my edge to roll. And then I'm going to just regular scale down a little bit. And then I'm going to come in. And then let me hide this because I want to make sure I'm focusing just on this. So basically I want to build this diffuser thing. So I need kind of a center post and I need another one out here. So I think what I'm going to do is My center post I can get by just putting an edge here. Maybe I'll pull this in a little bit more. There we go. All right, so I'm going to put an edge. And again, this is going to be a symmetrical object. So I'm going to insert an edge here. And that's going to be one of my teeth. Actually, you know what? I'm going to insert exact here because I don't want this going crazy on me. So I'm going to insert exact. And I'm going to put that there. And then I'm going to put another one over here. And what that does, you'll notice that when I inserted exact, since this is a simple part, when I inserted exact, it didn't add a whole bunch of extra geometry on me, but it allowed me to place it exactly where I wanted it to be. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete this face and this face. And it's going to freak out on me, which is fine, because I'm going to grab here, here, and here, here, oops, and I'm going to create my teeth. And I'm going to need to move this over a little bit. And I'm going to need to move this over a lot. And oops, I missed one there. That's why that went. So I'm going to just alt drag this back and then go to vert mode, select both of these and weld. There we go. Now, this thing is starting to get a little bit out of shape on me, so I'm going to delete half of it and go to box mode, straighten this out. I'm going to use that scale trick. I'm going to grab this, set my manipulator here, and scale this in like that. Bring this edge over, and it should be in pretty good shape. Now if I do this, we're in better shape. I'm going to make uniform real quick here, just to get a little bit of a handle on that. All right, now let's tune this up a little bit. I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to definitely need an edge in here. So I'm going to get this. And I'm going to put an edge right about there. I'm going to turn both sides on. Move this into there. Notice that starts tightening up a bunch. Same thing here. Okay. We're back on track. Grab these two, alt drag, move them a little bit, alt drag, move them in a little bit. And then I've got an edge loop here that I can just alt drag in. And then I can look at my edge count. I've got 1, 2, well, let's just double click and we can get them all 10. So there's 10 edges here. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, I can bridge those together using 1, 2, 3, 4 segments. So I'm just going to do that. 4. It's going to make a mess. The reason it did that is because it didn't join these edges with the other ones. So all we have to do is weld these, and weld these. And same thing over here. You grab this edge loop, to scale it in a little bit. I've got 8 edges here, so I can go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What do I have left? I've got 2 left, so I'm going to bridge between those using 2 segments. It's going to make a mess. And all I need to do to fix that, weld these 2. That was something that used to make me nuts. When I would do something like that and it would blow the model apart, I didn't know that all I needed to do was just keep going. So, as long as you know that it's going to freak out, it's no big deal. Now the model blew apart here because my symmetry wasn't right. So I'm just going to pre-select and weld, pre-select and weld, pre-select and weld, pre-select and weld, pre-select and weld. Now I should be able to smooth. There we go. So if you know that, if you know when you do an operation that the model's going to freak out, it's not a big deal. Where, you know, when I was just getting started doing this, I would do something like that, the model would freak out, and I would, you know, I'd just be like, I don't understand what just happened. My model just blew apart, and I would, you know, I would close it in frustration. And you know, that's can be a little bit of a frustrating aspect of getting the software. But once you understand that that's not, you know, an awful thing, then you just can just proceed and, as the English like to say, stay calm and carry on. All right, so let's show this whole model here and see what we got. So now we have this nice diffuser. It's a separate piece, and it also has, you know, the same topology as the other thing. So if you did want to bridge this back in, you could, but in this case I want a color break there. So again, I'm going to use my scale trick, flatten that out. And you got your big gnarly diffuser. Let's add some edges back here to get a license plate reveal. Since we've got symmetry on, we can just, oops, don't need both sides. We can break it about there. It'll add it on the other side as well. And I'm going to go to box mode. And it's going to be kind of a big license plate opening, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to throw it in there like this. All right, let's smooth that and see what we got. Just need to tighten it up. I'm going to insert on both sides. Something in here. Same thing here. Now I'm going to go into face mode and just pull these down a little bit to adjust this opening. Pull this down. I'm going to pull this out a little bit because I want a little trunk bulge over there. Maybe not. There. I'm going to sharpen that up a little bit. Again, however close you get those isoprams together is how tight that's going to get. And in this case, I'm going to move this whole thing pull this edge in just a little bit. Kind of a little detail going on in there. I'm going to insert one more edge because I want to pull this. I want to pull the top of this license plate out just a hair. So I'm going to do that. Grab just this center point right here. Pull it out. Tuck this under. There we go. Get a little bit of a detail going on there. All right. Any questions on that so far? It's all pretty much the same thing over and over again. You know, add detail, pull, extrude, add detail, pull, extrude, add detail, pull, extrude. So let's look at something a little different. Let's look at how we would do the wing on this thing. And I don't have the wing drawn, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of freehand a wing in here. We'll say something like that. And we'll go to top view. And I'm just going to alt drag this thing. Should be set, yeah. I'm just going to alt drag to create some geometry here. I'm going to go about 3 times. Go to perspective view, scale it, start turning my corner to make the upright. May need to just do a little bit of pulling here to straighten this out. Go back to this loop, go to my scale, scale it up one more time, go to my translate, alt drag, get my edge, go back to my scale, just going to scale in. See how many edges we have. Got 9 edges. So if I go 1, 2, 3, let's see. So we've got a little bit of a complicated situation here because I have an odd number of edges. So I'd either have to add an edge or tee some detail off. In this case, to make it simple, I'm just going to add an edge. So I'm going to use that, and let's say that is my end. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've only got 1, 2, 3 here. So I'm going to just insert an edge here, and I'm going to just do it exact so it doesn't change the shape. Right-clicking on this. I'm just going to add one there. And so now I've got 10 edges. I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bridge between them using one segment. The model's going to blow apart when I do this because it's not going to weld the 2 edges together. Segments. Actually, maybe it will weld. Maybe it won't blow apart. No, it didn't. Cool. All right. The reason it didn't is because it knew that that one edge there was where it was supposed to be, so it welded it together for me automatically. I'm going to make uniform just to straighten all the isoparams out. And I've got my wing. So now I can start messing with this thing. Pull it out a little bit. Give it a little arc. Where'd you go? Match with the back of this thing. Let's throw some symmetry on it. And this edge probably needs to get a little farther away from the center line. As does this one. And if you have too many edges, like if there's a weird dent in here, just kill this one. Move this one out. Use it to control it like a 3-point arc. And let's sculpt on that thing just a little bit. Let's grab a point here and play with it a little bit, see what happens. Start getting some little surface definition there. Start to see that definition start to show up there. Okay. So let's make the uprights for that. And again, you know, however you want to mess with this thing is up to you. Change the shape of it, sharpen it up, whatever. All right, I'm going to resist my designer nerdling urges here. Let's talk about how to make this thing. So I need to make a little upright here, and I'm going to do this using the pipe command. And I'm just going to lay out a quick strut. Need a near. There we go. And not a point. All right, so we have some curves. And I want to create a strut out of this. And so basically what I've done is I've just laid out a flat pattern of curves. Nothing special. And I'm going to just run the pipe command. And what it's going to allow me to do is to, this radius is huge. There we go. That's even big. There we go. Is to lay out a series of curves and pipe them, and then just apply some settings to create a rounded strut model there. Now there's a couple of things going on here that I don't like. So if we go back to box mode, I'm just going to really quickly straighten this stuff out. This edge has got to go back up here. That edge has got to go up there. Move this edge up a little bit. Just some real quick adjustments to tune that up. Go back to smooth mode, and we have a nice strut there. If you want to sharpen it, we can just insert an edge around the entire thing. There. That's going to sharpen it up. And obviously, however you want to detail this thing, you can.
Kyle, just a heads up, we're coming up against our 90 minutes. I'm not sure how much more modeling we have done for the main part, but
Okay.
we'll reserve a little bit of time for QA as well.
All right. So this is our strut. And then the last thing I really want to show is how to convert this thing to NURBS and create stuff based off of that. Drag that down. Okay. So let's say, for instance, that I wanted a very specific intake on the side of this thing, like you know, the side of an M3 or the side of a Mini Cooper or something like that. Well, we can subdivide, create geometry, make an edge, match the curve, do all that kind of stuff to do, you know, to do what we need to do, or we can just go ahead and convert the model to NURBS by right-clicking on the create. You'll notice up here this is Rhino polysurface. Let me get rid of some of these isoparams. And we can come right in here and create whatever shape we want. As a curve. And this is obviously big and huge and ugly. You get the point. Trim a hole in this thing. And you can duplicate this edge using the Rhino duplicate edge command. Join it. And let's just rebuild it so that it's not crazy. Let's go about 24. We can check our deviation. And then you can start building a T-Splines part right off of this.
Yeah, let me just jump in as you work on that, Kyle. A question came up
Sure.
in the chat box a while ago, what the differences are between T-Splines and subdivision surface modeling and other packages. And this is one of the big ones, that you can start T-Splines from NURBS curves or NURBS surfaces and model that way, which just really helps with the integration of T-Splines into the rest of your CAD modeling process.
All right. So you can build your intake right off of that. And then if you want it to match up exactly, let me get rid of my curve here. We can run the T-Splines match command. And I want to match this border to that. Match a closed loop with an open loop. Did I not grab the whole thing? That's what it was. All right, let me back this off just a hair so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. All right, so I'm going to pick this whole edge. I'm going to match it to that whole edge. Oh, did I not get the whole thing again? Doggone it. All right. There, there. There we go. Match the whole thing in there. Let me let that refine.
And just as Kyle is doing this, this is one other of the main differences between T-Splines and subdivision surface modeling, is to be able to match up the edge of the surface to a NURBS surface or a NURBS curve.
And you'll notice that if I TS shiny this, it's matched right in there with the NURBS model. If I convert this thing to NURBS and join it, and run a show naked edges, you'll notice that we've got no naked edges. So I always get this question: how do you make trim stuff? How do you make holes and stuff? You can either do it with topology like we did back here, or you can convert the model to a NURBS and do it just like you normally used in regular NURBS modeling. The benefit being that you can then take your trimmed edge and create more geometry off of the NURBS edge, create a new T-Splines part off of it, and work with it that way. So you can either build the entire model in T-Splines if you're comfortable doing that, or you can rough out your big shapes and do your detailing in NURBS, and then do additional detailing in T-Splines, and then work back that way. Or you can rough out the whole model, in T-Spline, convert the thing to NURBS, and do your detailing just like you normally would. So let's take a look at just the finished model, and I apologize for that crash in the middle here. Otherwise, I'd show this model complete. But I'm going to hide this one for right now and show the completed model. Hide my image. And you'll notice that the way that I did this particular model is these are T-Splines parts, the hood, and the body and everything I converted to NURBS, and then I just Booleaned them together. My additional intakes and stuff like that were T-Splines parts. These were imported geometry. Actually, no, those are T-Splines parts I made. And same thing with the taillights, same thing with the exhaust pipes, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with the license plate. And then to finish it off, basically, I just, to make the window glass and stuff after I converted to NURBS, I just went ahead and did some trimming curves in here. And you can continue to detail the model from here. The upside is, before I did this, I made sure and saved the T-Splines parts on a different layer. So say I got down the road a little bit and decided that there was something going on here that I didn't like, I could always go back to the original T-Splines body, make the modification, convert it to NURBS, use my original trim curves, and get right back to where I was in order to be able to finish this thing up. So, so that's kind of what I have for you today. Sorry that we went a little bit over. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to field those now. And thanks for coming.
Okay, yeah, thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your being here. This was a fun webinar series for us to put on. Especially appreciate the chats. That makes it, I think, more interesting for all of us to have this be more interactive. Let's see, we responded to a lot of questions during the webinar. One question, Kyle, just about your how you use the, I think it was picture frame to show the reference image.
Yeah.
Just a question about how you're able to have that be kind of translucent and that spins around in the scene. Is the key to that using the picture frame command, or how do you do that?
Yes. Yeah, picture frame, if I bring this up, let me hide this for a second. This is all picture frame stuff. If I unlock this, you'll notice these are all individual picture frames imported, and you just run the picture frame command, drag the thing to your size, and it gives you a plane. The cool thing about this is you can scale these using all of your scale manipulators and things like that. You can scale 1, scale 2. Obviously, it's a two-dimensional object, so scale 3 wouldn't make any sense. But you can scale 1, scale 2. You can skew it. You can move the points of the object and things like that if you wanted to taper it or do something screwy like that. But if you want to change the opacity of the thing, if you bring up your properties by hitting the F3 key and go to your material settings for that, it's basically the transparency setting right here. If I change this to 50, you'll notice that it's less transparent. If I change it to 0, it's 100% view. If I change the transparency to 90, it is yelling at me. Stop it. I don't want a color. I want the transparency. Come on. All right. It's gonna. Why are you doing that? All right. Anyway, this transparency setting that makes the difference here, as far as the opacity settings and stuff like that. See if this one will behave itself. All right. My computer has decided that it wants to make me look stupid in front of everybody. So anyway, but change this opacity setting right here is what affects that. So if I change this to 90, you notice that that gets a lot lighter and darker. I always throw those on a layer and lock them, and then that way I can just turn them on and off real easy. Any other questions we can help you with?
Let's see. There's just one question about radial symmetry, Kyle. I don't know how much time you've spent playing around with that, but if you wanted to just show that quickly.
Sure. Radial symmetry is really cool because just like axial symmetry, it can be discovered. And say, for instance, if I bring out a torus out here and I set this at 0. I can break this up into symmetrical pieces by discovering this radial segments. I'm going to do this in 3. I'm going to discover it. And you'll notice that what it did was it broke it up into symmetry. Now I think I had too many segments. Actually, I don't think I had enough segments in this when I originally did it, but if I subdivide this thing, and try it again. Do symmetry. There. Radial. Discover. There. And actually I need to go there. There we go. So now you'll notice that if I bring up my edges and I move this thing, it's arrayed symmetrically throughout the model, which is really awesome because you can do some really cool stuff with it. And obviously you can kill that at any time and redo it. That help?
Yep, looks good.
Okay.
Okay. Well, as everyone leaves, again, please just take a minute to fill out that survey. We appreciate that, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our website forum, on the T-Splines LinkedIn group, or in their place that you'd like to talk T-Splines. We look forward to continuing the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Okay. Thanks again, Kyle.
Yep.